Atheism. It's bad for logic, bad for science, and bad for humanity. Today we'll be following up on yesterday's show about Richard Dawkins' comments on the Tebow commercial concerning the issue of pro-life, and this time we're going to talk about the issue of homeschooling as well. Hello and welcome to the Gary DeMar Show. Once again, I'm your host, Joel McDurmond, for the next few minutes, talking about what Richard Dawkins has criticized in the Tim Tebow advertisement that aired during the Super Bowl. We've all seen it by now. The pro-life commercial really was just an advertisement for focusonthefamily.com to draw people to the website where they could hear the rest of the story. And Dawkins had these inane criticisms that were completely illogical, and we went through those yesterday. Let me rehearse his comments. I gather that Tim Tebow is extremely good at football. That's just as well, for he certainly isn't very good at thinking. We showed yesterday who it was exactly that wasn't very good at thinking. It wasn't Tebow, it was Mr. Dawkins. But this is the comment I left out yesterday that I want to talk about today. Perhaps the fact that he was homeschooled by missionary parents is to blame. A little bit later in the post, Dawkins is kind of talking about scientific probability in the issue of conception, and he says this: the sperm that conceived Tim was part of an ejaculate of an average estimate of 40 million. If any one of them had won the race to Mrs. Tebow's ovum instead of that one that did, Tim would not have been born, somebody else would. Probably not such a good quarterback, but, we can hope, a better logician. And this, he adds, who might have survived the homeschooling and broken free. This is the point where we throw back in Dawkins' face all of the millions of geniuses who came out of homeschooled families and homeschooled situations throughout history. Homeschooling obviously has nothing to do with how good of a logician you are. Of course, Dawkins really would know that. He would have to concede it in the end, but this doesn't make good press for atheists who want to bash on conservative Christians, many of whom have made the decision to homeschool, like the Tebow family did. Actually, they basically had to since they were missionaries. But Dawkins wants to take that dig at conservative families, and he wants to keep on the caricature that homeschooled people are stupid, and so he talks about their poor use of logic, which he's wrong about, and he just keeps up bringing up the issue of how bad it is. Yesterday I said, and today I've said, that atheism is bad for logic. I showed that yesterday. That is also bad for science. I think I could show that today easily with this comment about the 40 million sperm. It's pointless. Science is about studying things that are in existence. It's about evidence and the use of evidence and the repeatability of experiments. It's pointless to talk about what would have been or what might have been, which is also a logical fallacy, but it's bad science to begin with. But this issue of the homeschooling comes up. So let's talk about the issue of homeschooling and the issue of who's smart and who's not. Homeschoolers around the world are well aware, and in many places on the web there are these lists of people, famous people, who were homeschooled. For those of you who are not familiar with it, let me read a few of the names. Famous generals: Stonewall Jackson, Robert E. Lee, Douglas MacArthur, and George Patton. Inventors: these are the very interesting ones, I think. Alexander Graham Bell, Thomas Edison, Cyrus McCormick revolutionized the agricultural industry and later founded a seminary. Orville Wright and Wilbur Wright, obviously the brothers first in flight in North Carolina in 1903, could be off on that. All of these scientists and inventors homeschooled. Should we attribute their stupidity? Should we attribute the stupidity of the telegram? Should we attribute the stupidity of the light bulb and the phonograph record? The electric transmission, admittedly DC and not AC. Should we attribute the stupidity of the automatic reaper by McCormick and the airplane? Should we attribute the stupidity of all those things to homeschooling? Would Dawkins be ready to do that? Artists: Claude Monet, Leonardo da Vinci, Jamie Wyeth and Andrew Wyeth. And if you haven't seen the Wyeth Museum in southeastern Pennsylvania, I highly recommend you go there. Some of the most beautiful original American art, most of it rural, beautiful stuff. Presidents, most of the American founding fathers, Washington, Jefferson, Adams, Madison, later presidents, Theodore Roosevelt, even the arch-liberal presidents, Woodrow Wilson, the only president to have a PhD, Mr. Dawkins, and Franklin Roosevelt, homeschooled. Scientists, Albert Einstein, whom Dawkins is always quoting against the issue of a personal God. We do know that he was, if anything, a deist, more likely something more of an atheist, really, I think. Einstein, homeschooled. Booker T. Washington, Blaise Pascal, statesman. Benjamin Franklin, Patrick Henry, William Penn. I'm just picking a few out of this long list as I go down. Composers, Irving Berlin, Mozart, Mendelssohn, homeschooled. Writers, Charles Dickens, The Skeptic, Mark Twain, Pearl S. Buck, who was a daughter of missionary parents, homeschooled, and later in life became an atheist, homeschooled. And of course, one of the arch-atheists of all time, who atheists on the internet love to quote, George Bernard Shaw, homeschooled. We can go down lists of other famous people, Charlie Chaplin, Andrew Carnegie, Will Rogers, Albert Schweitzer, the skeptic, and although he was a seminarian and Christian, he was more of a Quaker type of a freethinker. Ansel Adams, the great photographer, John Stuart Mill, economist, Abigail Adams, fighter for women's rights, at least very early in life, Martha Washington. We could go on and on. The list of the entire Constitutional Convention, essentially, were all homeschooled. George Washington, Madison, Witherspoon, Franklin, Johnson, Clymer, Pinckney, Wythe, Blunt, Spate, Rutledge, Livingston, it goes on, George Mason, all homeschooled. And even the skeptic might say, yes, but they didn't derive their homeschooling. They didn't derive from their homeschooling the arguments and the ideas they used to found the American documents. That was credited to the Enlightenment. But I would say, no, they got their ideas from John Locke. This would be conceded, of course, because it's true. And I would say, yes, and John Locke was homeschooled until he was 14 years old, homeschooled by his father. And then after that, he went to a private Christian school at Westminster in London. All of those ideas, homeschooled, most of them Christians, but even famous atheists, as I mentioned, Buck and Shaw. Partially homeschooled people include Clarence Darrow, the arch-atheist prosecution lawyer at, or I guess would be the defense attorney at the Scopes trial, and Thomas Paine, partially homeschooled, although most of it was really self-education. Famous, not atheist deist, but basically a critic of Christianity, and the atheists loved to quote him. All of them homeschooled. Shall we attribute to these people stupidity, Mr. Dawkins? Shall we attribute their atheism in those cases to the stupidity garnered from their homeschool? Should we attribute Pearl S. Buck's stupidity of becoming an atheist to the fact that she was homeschooled under missionary parents, just like Tim Tebow? Should we attribute to all these people stupidity? The creation and the founding of the American Republic, the best documents, I should say some of the best documents, pertaining to human freedom and civil government written in human history, all homeschooled. Dawkins, you don't have much to compete with. And if atheism is going to sweep away homeschooling, I would say that's bad for humanity. Atheism, bad for logic, bad for science, bad for humanity. I'd say pro-life agenda is a good one. And I would say that these talks about the sperm eating the ovum and all this stuff about conception and probability, I'd say that's where Christians need to start. Theology, Christianity, begins in the bedroom. And Christians say, well, where's that in the Bible? I'd say it's on the front page. Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it. Go and do it, or else we'll face the logic and science and the anti-humanity of atheism. Thank you for joining me today. See you next time on The Gary DeMar Show.
For more related to today's topic, check out The Deluded Atheist, a response to Richard Dawkins' The God Delusion. You will find it at AmericanVision.com.